Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your consciousness transformation and ascension guide, originator of a practice called Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift live stream podcast. So thank you for joining. I'm so excited. I was happy to be gone for a couple weeks and have a great, real vacation. But wow, being gone for several weeks brings up so many topics. It's very funny. So like even from when I posted the other day, we're going to talk about relationships today. It's like I have 5 other topics that I could do, like bing, 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 like right off the top of the bat, because we have so much going on energetically right now. But relationships are really good. And I've talked about this several times, but there are different aspects. And so that's why this keeps on coming up. The biggest thing that, we talk about conscious relationships, having a higher vibration relationship as we get into more, conscious observance and focusing on our own higher consciousness. And yet what happens is we end up starting in this place of that's still that of lower vibration because it's habit, right? And the lower vibration means things like lack. When we come into a relationship from lack, from the idea that somebody else will complete us or make us feel more complete, then that is a lower vibration of needing to fill what we believe to be a hole inside of us, right? So, I'm talking about this because my vacation was to celebrate my 25th wedding anniversary, which will be the end of July, with my husband. And so, like many have asked me, like, well, so what's the secret? What's the, what's the trick? All that kind of stuff for the longevity. And I've also helped many go to the other level, which is to go through a divorce and a much more conscious level too, because you can do that as well, even though many think that that's like a farce, but it's not, because I've actually worked with many people to go through this. But let's start with the relationship part, right? We're brought up to believe in this romantic, like we believe that it is a romantic notion to believe that somebody completes us, right? And really, when we shift into a higher vibration, we get into a different place of inner wholeness, right? To know that we're whole, to know that I love myself, that I can be by myself, that I don't need somebody to make me happy. And that is when we come to a relationship from a higher vibration. Because then you come to it as, I love hanging out with you. I love that we can spend time together. I love that we can share this journey and have our own journeys at the same time. And yet there's no sense of need with each other, because it's just like, hey, we're here together. Let's have fun and enjoy the journey, right? And indulge ourselves in our own journey without having to depend on somebody else to feel like, oh, I have to be happy, I have to be with this person. That is the one biggest misconception that we have as humans, that we need to have somebody to really fulfill us or complete us, or that we're not a complete person unless we're in a relationship or married or whatever. So one of the first things is, like I was reflecting on this a lot when I was on vacation, because I honestly can't believe it's been 25 years. It's crazy that I've been married that long. When I never had originally never wanted to get married to begin with, like never thought I would get married to begin with. But anyhow, when I met my husband, I had been through a number of relationships, whatever. I was pretty wild, young adult. And I had finally come to this place of saying, this is who I am. And so was my husband. Actually, he'd gone through some rocky relationships and whatever. And we both sort of came to the table as like, hey, this is who I am. There's no like being somebody who I'm not, trying to impress them in a way that, isn't authentic to me. And I was just like, this is who I am. Either you take it or leave it. So let's have fun as I am, or you can go. And he was the same way. And neither of us were looking for long-term relationships. We weren't looking to get married, all that kind of stuff. And then here we are, and that's actually 27 years since I've met him. So, but the thing is, what we forget about in our relationships often, and it is a very deeply ingrained habit, we forget about the importance of authenticity and self-love. We mold ourselves to be with a person. And why is that? Because we believe that we need to be fulfilled by somebody else, right? That we were not fulfilled or completely happy, or we're not completely, a whole person unless we're in a relationship. Many, I can't tell you how many people just come to me and they'll be like, so when am I going to meet my soulmate? And I sort of laugh and I'm like, well, first of all of us are soulmates when we cross paths because we've all agreed to have some kind of effect on each other's lives. But in terms of the meaning of like the soulmate, or whether you want to call it, it doesn't even matter what you want to call it. I always say it's when you don't need them, when you don't think you need them anymore, when you are in this place where you're happy with yourself and you don't need to have anybody in your life to make you happy. So, and I always get the smirk or the laugh or the snort, and I'm like, but that's the truth. And I can't tell you how many people I've worked with to help them get to that place, within themselves where they remember their wholeness and their authenticity and their happiness. And then they don't care, honestly. Then they get to a place where it's like, I don't care whether I'm alone or with somebody else, doesn't matter. I'm pretty happy as I am. And then that's typically when they come across that person. And sometimes they don't, and they're perfectly happy with it. So either way, it works out. We're really not in the habit of that. We still I always talk about that, like what we have created a romantic notion that, two halves have to make the whole, and, meaning that we're not whole on our own and all that kind of stuff. Well, that causes a whole lot of pressure on so many of us culturally and around the world as humans to believe that we are not whole as we already are. So when we come to relationships from a more conscious level, one of the most key things is to get to this place, first of all, to first and foremost, focus on your own self-love, to focus on that place on where you are happy with yourself. And then when you meet people that you want to hang out with or be with, and this, by the way, can be any kind of relationship. It doesn't even have to be romantic, right? It can be your friends, could be your family, whatever. But when you come to the table from this place of self-love, then you're not needing something from the other person. You're not needing validation outside of you. So what happens a lot of times, and we'll go into romantic relations because we are talking about that too. And but when we go into that, especially when we go into marriage often, or even long-term relationships, little sacrifices start happening. When we do it from a place of, I need this other person in my life to make me happy, for me to be whole and complete, then you start to chip away at your own authenticity because there's a need there and a sense of lack. So then the ego starts to say, I need to keep this person in my life. And to do that, it believes it has to do certain things. So how many spouses I know who spend like a majority of their time being a part of what their spouse enjoys doing, even though, and they talk themselves into liking it, but they don't really like it. Or like, if the spouse wasn't there, they wouldn't be doing it or partaking in that particular activity. And yet, they believe that this is how I feel close to my spouse or my significant other. I don't realize it's a sacrifice. You can be in a relationship and have different interests and say, I honor that. And okay, I'll play along and be with you every once in a while, but I'm also going to honor myself and do and prioritize what also makes me happy. And I would expect that the other person would honor me as well, right? And yes, you do have stuff that crosses over, and then you can both enjoy things together, and it's okay for everybody to have some different interests as well. However, what I also see a lot of, and because I've worked with thousands of people in what I do, and many couples issues and everything else, but often marital issues come from, or partnership issues come from this place of resentment because of sacrifice. So what'll happen is, so my husband and I went through a period of time, 7 years ago, something like that, where we literally tore down the entire relationship. And we had gotten pretty bumpy, and it was a rather difficult time for us. And part of it was because I had gone in this completely new direction, and my husband believed all these things about having to keep up with me, having to do certain things, having to be obligated to do certain things, which I never did expect, but it was like these unspoken expectations, right? And we had many, many loud discussions. And the key though was, and I said, well, let's just be honest. And sometimes it hurts being honest a little bit because, and only we're hurt because of the ego, right? But we can't understand each other unless we're really honest and authentic with who we are. So what happened was we both got to this place where we went authentic, and we had to tear down all these walls of expectations and things that we thought the other person expected and everything else, tell the truth of where we were on certain things, and then step away and breathe to allow ourselves the space to be who we are, to check in with who we are, and to see if it made sense to move forward in the place of who we really were. And we had to commit to being honest and authentic. And when we do that, this is another thing that's a really challenging thing for many in relationships, is it is absolutely crucial for us to be authentic and honest with ourselves, number one, right? So it's really important to be looking inside at ourselves and meditating and doing, call energy work and expansion work and consciousness work, to be observant and aware of ourselves, and to take full self-responsibility for the choices that we make in this reality, and to not project them onto another person in a relationship. And again, this does not have to just be like a partnership of romantic kind. It can be any kind of friendship or partnership or familial relationship too. But the key is, number one, to stop blaming the other person for your unhappiness, because nobody makes you unhappy but you. Okay. The other thing that's really important is to say, okay, so why, why does this make me unhappy? And get to the place of, and there's an exercise that I do with my students on getting to a place of self-responsibility of saying, so why do I care? Why do I care that this person does this? Why does it bother me that this person does this? Until you get to a place of saying, when this happens, I feel this way. And then you realize, oh no, this all comes from me, right? So when you can do that, then you can change that within yourself, or that you can step away and say, okay, thank you for this soulmate, for actually reflecting this thing inside of me that I was not acknowledging before. That becomes really productive and expansion oriented. It becomes very growth oriented. And if you both can commit to that within a relationship, actually, it doesn't even matter. If you commit to that in a relationship, then you become very aware of, does this relationship still serve me in a way that's expansive and whole and authentic? Or is it time for me to move into a different direction? So what I have realized, in the reflection of when I was on the vacation and thinking, wow, it's been 25 years and we've had rocky times, we've had awesome times, and it's been way even more awesome ever since we shifted that whole relationship dynamic to a much more authentic, self-responsible place where we don't fight anymore. Like, we can disagree, and then we can agree to disagree, and then say, you know what, I can honor your reality and I honor mine. And then it allows us to actually be far less defensive with each other, far more interactive. And it takes us out of roles, right? And that's part of what happens, is we believe that we're only valuable as a certain kind of person in a certain kind of role. I see a lot of people who've been, housewives or husbands, and stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads, and it's easy to, the old role is that they take care of everything in the house, and then the other one is the other spouse is the breadwinner. And that's really, it ends up happening, and they feel like that's what adds value. So I have to stay in this role because it makes me valuable to be loved, instead of realizing I am perfect and valuable as I am. And if I'm not happy doing this and I'm not being authentic, then I'm teaching other people around me. If my role is to be a parent, or one of the roles that I choose is to be a parent or a spouse or whatever, I am teaching the people who are under my purview that it is okay to not be authentic, that it's okay for me to sacrifice myself and to sacrifice my own happiness for the happiness of others. And most people I ask when they come in and they're talking about their resentment that's built up, and that yet they don't know how to step out of it, and it'll just break the whole family if they actually do what they want to do. And it's like, but then maybe it needs to be broken, right? And what I tell people all the time is, or they come in and they're not happy in a relationship, they're unhappy in their marriage, but they don't know, like they feel stuck, and they're like, oh, I'm just going to stay together for the kids. I'll stay here for the kids. And then I'm like, but look at what you're teaching your children. Now, children right now are much more open energetically than ever before, like wide open, because we're all awakening en masse, and remembering our divine abilities, our natural divine abilities, and the kids are coming in already there, right? So they are so hypersensitive energetically. And I always tell them, do you realize that no matter what kind of facade you think you're putting on, if you're unhappy in your relationship, if unhappy in your marriage, unhappy in the household, unhappy in the role that you're choosing to play, and it's not what other people expect of you, it's what you're choosing to play and allowing other people to expect it of you, then you're teaching them to perpetuate that kind of ideology. So it's a very different kind of perspective. And when we come to this place of saying, yes, it's okay to be selfish. I mean, people say, oh, well, that's so selfish and whatever. And it's like, yes. And it's selfish in a great way when I take it from a place of unconditional love, and I do it for a place of nurturing me, because let me tell you what happens. When we allow ourselves the space to be authentically who we are, to be able to express what our bliss is, to do what it is that makes our heart sing, then, like, when we're selfish in that way, then what happens is just the opposite on everything else. We get to a place where we're so overflowing with love and happiness and joy that we can do anything but share it with others. Then we want to help other people. We want to do more things for people. We want to, and we do it in such an energy of no obligation. We do it in this place of, I'm just sharing love. And that makes it a much higher vibration of interaction. So when I was reflecting on, my marriage, right? And where I've come to this point, and all the people around me who are going through even conscious separations and divorces, which I'll talk about that in a minute. The thing is to get to a place of non-attachment, even to the idea of marriage. I really believe the book of marriage needs to be thrown out and rewritten, because we're in a much different place than we've been in for a really long time. And yet the institution still exists the way that we expected it, like centuries ago. And number one, it is this: in any relationship, whether it's marital or not, whether it's friends, partners, business partners, family, or whatever, the key is to constantly ask ourselves, okay, am I being authentic? Am I allowing myself the space for authenticity? Is there some reason why I feel like I cannot in this relationship? And if it is that I feel like I cannot, why? Is it because I feel like that I need this relationship to identify me as a certain valuable kind of person? But if I allow myself to be authentic, does this relationship still, I don't want to say the word serve, but is it still good and expansive and solid? And does it serve both of us to be in this relationship in authenticity and honesty and unconditional love? Because when we come to the table in that unconditional love and the self-love and the full self-responsibility, then we can, then we actually, like I said, we stop fighting, because then we start taking responsibility for our own feelings and emotions, and having observance of that and how to shift that, right? That's a whole discussion for a different day. But when we can do that, and we can even talk about things of okay, so I'm going to do this, and I love you, and I love this, and blah, blah, blah. And I also honor myself and know that I deserve this. And I know that I can honor myself by doing this. That changes the energy often. And so many people come to me and it's like they'll take baby steps on that. Like they're hiding a whole side of themselves that they haven't been sharing in their relationship or their family or whatever. And when they start to share it, what's interesting is more times than not, what happens is this bumpy road of readjustment, right? Because everybody gets into a certain like mode. And then they get into a place of, if there's truly a connection of love and acceptance underneath, everybody around you will grow to accept who you are when they see that you're even happier by doing it, that you're even more fulfilled by doing it. Because when they truly love you and honor you for who you are, they want to see you that way. They're happy seeing you happy. And then that also holds the space vibrationally for them to be authentic and happy within themselves as well. So when we do that, we become the change we want to see in the world, right? And what I've realized in, one of the things that really has helped in the marriage has been that coming to that place of real authenticity and being there and staying there and committing ourselves to it and being honest with each other and being honest with ourselves. And knowing that we don't have to share every moment of every day. We don't have to share every single part or every single conversation of our lives. And it's not hiding it. It's just, it is or it isn't. But it's also that we honor and accept each other for who we are and that we are interested in that authenticity of the other person. So yes, there are things that I listen to and I find somewhat interesting, but not something I want to do all the time, that my husband does, and vice versa, I'm sure. And we engage, but we also find some really good common center ground as well of things that we both really enjoy. Because it is like, there are many who say, oh, well, I don't know why I'm with my spouse because we have nothing in common. It's like, well, then that is strange. How do you have nothing in common and want to continue a partnership where you're together and sharing the journey? And many times when we sit there and become more authentic, we realize, there's been a lot of stuff I've been sort of faking. Like, this is what when I talk to people. So the thing that, like we talk about in longevity is like, oh, you made it to 25 years, you made it to 50 years or 30 years or whatever. And I was looking at what that means to me, and what I find really interesting is that now I feel like I'm more authentically myself in my relationship than I've ever been. And I feel like my husband is in the same place. And as we've been together, the cool part is that we recognize each other energetically. We've been together many times in many lifetimes. But that we really recognize who we were underneath, so that all the other facade, it was almost like we've been peeling away our facades over the years and becoming more authentic to who we are, instead of like trying to be somebody that we're not. And so that's why, so we went through bumpy time in the middle, and then we're just like, it's getting better as we go. And also the key is to not be attached to the person, needing that person in your reality. If some time happened when it was like, okay, so now it's time for us to take our separate journeys, there's a place to be in real acceptance, say, okay, it's time to do that. And that's where we get into the conscious uncoupling part. So I have worked with many clients, actually more, like even more clients that are going through that, as well as helping them get to a place of being happier with themselves and then being happy in their relationship. So I always say it's like a 50-50 when they come in, they're having issues with their relationship. And then I say, well, so the key is that coming to that own happiness before we do anything with the relationship and starting to find that self-responsibility, because from there, then you can decide, is it time to move on? I have a fabulous friend, Sandy Anthony, who I posted on the Trinity website, a blog that she wrote about the conscious uncoupling with her husband of 33 years. And she talked about how they were joined at the hip, they've been inseparable, and there came a point where it was time for them to start on their separate paths. And it doesn't have to be both of you that, employ that, but actually it's been a great example to watch. I've also watched a number of people I know, clients and students and friends, do that. And I've had people come into me and start in tears saying, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm getting this voice and it's time for me to move on. And there's nothing really wrong with my relationship. It's just time for me to move on. And, we tend to judge it as a culture, and then they're afraid to be judged. They're afraid what people are going to think. And so I've worked many through that. because sometimes the voice is just saying it's time to move on. Sometimes in the universe and the higher self really starts giving you all these hits on the head that you're like, that it's time to move in a different direction, and nothing seems to work, and more things start to break. And yet we're so invested in what marriage is supposed to be. We're so invested on those roles culturally of what that's supposed to look like, right? And then we get into the relationship, and then we get really married to the role that we play within the relationship, that the ego gets very, very defensive about letting go of it completely and moving on. Well, what would that mean? So that's that, so that's something to think about in all of your relationships, all of them. Am I being authentic? Am I able to be authentic? Do I hold the space of my full authenticity in the presence and in the interactions with this person? Or am I sacrificing a part of myself to let, so that they can be who they want to be, or so that they will love me, so that I'm worthy, so that it proves to me that I'm worthy of being loved, because I don't believe that within myself. Because that's really what 99.8% of issues come from, is that we're just sacrificing. And then we fool ourselves into saying that it's not a sacrifice, that, oh no, it's just because I care about the person and I'm letting them do what they want to do. But then we're still holding it back as to who we are, and allowing them to then not honor that, because that's a part of it too. That's a part of that relationship. It's a dual thing. So there's a lot to be in consideration of here. There's a lot to look at. And when I was on vacation and I was looking at that, I was like, well, what's really cool about my relationship is we started in a place of relative authenticity, where we were in that place of, this is who I am, take it or leave it. And we had gone through so many different phases in 25 years, 27 years since I've been with him, but 25 years since we've been married. So I want to say I'm a completely different person today than I was when we got married, but actually I'm much more who I am today than I have ever been. And back then I was still trying to figure out who that was, right? So when we first got married, I actually was getting an inkling of that, being like, well, this is who I am, take me or leave me. But I still thought that I had to be a certain way, a certain kind of person. I had to have a certain kind of job. I had to, have certain kind of aspirations. I had to be worthy, to be, worthy of being loved, to be considered successful, or to be considered a success, right? So when I did that, so then over the years, as I started peeling away the layers of, what? I don't need that anymore. And when I looked at it, when I was on vacation and looking at this, it's it was really that I've been peeling off all these layers of inauthenticity that I thought were authenticity, to a place of, wow, I can just be, and I can be around this person, and I can just be who I am, and I can talk about anything that comes from my heart. I can talk about it in my sense of multidimensional self and everything else. And I can talk as 3D as I want, or as 5D, or as 10D, or I can not talk, or I can do anything. And I am still happy and comfortable doing that. And that person can accept me for who I am, and vice versa. So it's been not growing. It's not growing and changing, but it's actually almost, well, it is growing. It's growing because we're unchanging. We're de-changing. We're peeling back the stuff that's inauthentic, right, to a place of authenticity. And I so honor that we were able to see in each other, oh yeah, I remember you energetically. We've been together in all these lifetimes. And now we're ready to tie this up in a way that is really authentic, and from a place of self-love and happiness. And yes, okay, we have 3D things that, you get irritated about in day-to-day stuff. But I'm talking about overall self-love, because when you come from that place, everything else runs more smoothly. Everything else is just sort of so we had some weird details come up over the past, some weird things that have come up in the past 24 hours. And I could do an entire podcast on that today, energetically, that's going on collectively, because I've had so many calls this week on weird stuff. And that has caused some clunky weirdness in the 3D. And you know what? I'm just like, okay, it is what it is, sort of an eye roll. And then I just move on. So we always have that because that's part of the physicality of here, while we still live in separation and density like this part of us, then, we have these things that sometimes they sort of bump against each other and they cause a little friction or whatever. But the key is in that observance, in that place of authenticity and self-love, is to just accept every moment, to be present in it, to ask guidance, like what is there for me to do right here and now. And to trust that it's all perfect and taken care of. So like that goes into, and everything turns back to the self-awareness and to the self-love and to the self-trust and to the true acceptance that we are the divine. Each of us is the divine, fully embodied then in the individuals that we're representing at this moment. So when we can do that, and we start seeing that, because we can't love somebody really unless we love ourselves. We can say we love them and we'll say, well, I need them and everything else. But then listen to your words and your thoughts, because if you're saying that to yourself, well, I need them for this, or it's, I need this for this, or I don't want to be without them because then I'd have to do this and that would just be uncomfortable. Well, then you're doing the relationship from a place of lack. And like I said, that's like 99 point whatever part of many relationships where there's discomfort and not quite. We all deserve bliss, all of us. You, your spouse, your partner, your friends, your family deserve to be happy in every moment and deserve to be able to fully embody the authentic you in your divine glory in every moment. And if we allow ourselves that, and we can see those in our lives do that as well, then it becomes more fulfilling and nourishing, because then we're all happy. and then we're all very comfortable. And that's when we really can stop distracting ourselves with all of these efforts of all these things that we feel like we have to do to make somebody else happy, to keep a relationship going, to keep, somebody like loving us or whatever, because then it's not something we need. It's just something we choose. So home play this week is to look at your reality, to look at this stuff, look at your relationships, look at where you're coming from, and think of every one of them. If this ended today, how would I be? Would I be okay? Right? Is this relationship, does it serve us both of us, whoever it is, you and the other person, or the whole group? Does it serve us in the way that we're all allowed to be authentic 100%? Or am I sacrificing a little tiny part of me to play a role that is not authentic to who I am? And that takes a lot of honesty with ourselves. So be willing to be honest, even if it's uncomfortable and it causes self-judgment, because the ego will just jump up and be like, yeah, well, look at that, and no, you're a loser, and look at that, like, yeah, because you're a loser. I mean, people have told me this is what goes on, and I know I've had that happen at different times in my life. So let's start to shift the relationship dynamic and stop being so dependent on others for that validation and that love. And when we can start doing that, then we just change the nature of all the relationships that we have. So thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you next week. This is Angela Coulter signing off on this week's Living the Shift. Have a good one.